David and Rebecca, so good to welcome you here to our stage.
That was the warmest.
That was a warm welcome.
I just wanted to check. Wanted to make sure.
Okay. Temperature, it's good.
Thank you.
For, topic of faith here at the 92nd Street Y is a kind of a unique opportunity for us to talk about something that is obviously quite alive for the both of you and for many of us. My assumption of all those who are here and those who are online also are really both intrigued by this topic, but also find it deeply personal and intimate. So I wanted to begin tonight's discussion on belief in God and Jewish identity by framing it with two powerful influences, one more modern and one quite renowned but not modern. Menachem Kellner, who wrote extensively about faith, challenging the necessity of belief as a central core principle to Judaism, is building potentially on an older debate between Maimonides, Rambam, and other commentators. Maimonides famously asserted that belief in God should be considered the first mitzvah, the first obligation, fundamental to Jewish life and law, but the idea was resisted by other commentators who argued that belief as an inner conviction was too prost, it was too external to imagine belief as a necessary condition. It was the kind of the inner category of mitzvah needed. Believing God wasn't a mitzvah. It was too fundamental. And the controversy speaks to a long-standing question in Jewish thought: is belief in God itself a Jewish obligation? Or are the actions that we take and the values that we embody defining our Jewish identity? This debate is our backdrop here because we are not in a debate tonight about the existence of God, much as people might think that's what's going on here. We are actually having a conversation about the centrality of belief in God in defining Jewish identity. And both of you wrote very powerfully in SAPIR journal. Your articles took very different perspectives on faith and belief. Rabbi Wolpe, you emphasized the importance of faith as a Jewish foundation, while Rebecca, you approach belief in God with deep philosophical skepticism. Could you both summarize your perspective on the necessity or the lack thereof of belief in God for a meaningful Jewish identity? Maybe we'll start with you, Rabbi Wolpe.
So first of all, thank you, Rabbi Ingber, for the introduction and also the framing of the question. I think I'm going to take the first speaker's prerogative to say, let's all do first names. We're all friends, so we'll do Rebecca, David, and David.
That's good.
And I'm glad we're not actually discussing the existence of God, because that tends to get into sort of standard debating points. And this is one of those discussions that I'm genuinely interested in, the kind of exchange and the question of, can you sustain a Jewish tradition without a belief in God? And the reason that it interests me is that I have a deep desire to sustain the Jewish tradition, and yet I don't think that you can sustain it ultimately without belief in God. And if I could be persuaded that you can, that would be a positive for me, as opposed to something that I would be upset about. And I would say that there are the two major reasons that I think it is unlikely, if not impossible, to continue a belief in God in the Jewish tradition is that, first of all, it is historically, philosophically, the foundation of Judaism, right? No classical Jewish philosopher said, oh, by the way, Judaism is purely a sociological movement and has no theological component. All classical Jewish thinkers, even one as radical as Mordechai Kaplan, thought that the founder of Reconstructionism thought that Judaism had a deep theological origin. And second, and this will be my sort of, I hope I won't repeat this ad nauseum, but this will be my fundamental point, Judaism is countercultural. It means doing things that you would not ordinarily do, that are difficult to do, that are unique to Judaism. That is, ritual behaviors. Being good is not uniquely Jewish. Being kind is not uniquely Jewish. Healing the world or healing the bay, they're not uniquely Jewish. Keeping kosher is uniquely Jewish. Keeping Shabbos is uniquely Jewish. And I don't know how you sustain uniquely Jewish behaviors unless you think they have an origin beyond ourselves. And those are the two reasons that I think it's difficult, if not impossible, to transmit Judaism through the generations without divine origin.
Rebecca?
I don't know that I disagree with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for coming. There you go.
Okay. I was, how do I put this? I identify myself as a Jewish atheist. I am an atheist. I've practiced Judaism as an Orthodox Jew for most of my life because of a vow that I had made not to break my parents' heart. And so, I know what it is to live as an observant Jew. My children actually went to yeshiva. But I am, in my heart, quoting the Psalms that you quote in your piece, a fool. That I do not. I do not. But I feel very, very strongly about being Jewish. I identify very, very much with other Jewish atheists, particularly Baruch Spinoza, about whom I've written a book and many, many articles. And I think that there is something. My piece was called, "Why is a Jewish Atheist Different from All Other Atheists?" And I asked 4 questions in the piece. I think that the role that Jewish atheists have played in moving the culture forward, it has to do with their being both, part of the culture and not part of the culture. They're inside it and outside it. They, certainly Spinoza, he was even, put into harem by his own people. I mean, he's the
Excommunicated,
ultimate.
yeah.
He's I don't like to use the word excommunicated.
So how would you define cherem?
Harem, just because, excommunication, everybody thinks of it in terms of the Catholic religion.
Sure.
And, a harem was you were separated from the community, and sometimes it was usually temporary. Spinoza, if you don't, know that much about him, he was born in the 17th century. He was born in Amsterdam, which was the freest city of all of Europe. It was kind of like New York City in the United States, and everybody, free thinkers, flocked to Amsterdam. Descartes lived there, Locke lived there. But he was born it was a Portuguese Jewish community, and they had been through, the Inquisition was still raging in the time that he was born. And the rabbis of that, I come from a rabbinical family, so I know how hard it is to be a rabbi. They really had their hands full, the rabbis of Amsterdam, because these were returning Catholics, and many of them had ideas about how to improve Judaism, and So they used harem very, very often. You bought meat from the wrong butcher, you were put into harem. But Spinoza was the only permanent harem on record. So, but that's why. Sorry, such a digression.
Sorry to derail. Yeah,
but that's why I
you were
like to use
making
the
a bigger
word.
point, though,
Yes.
about the influence of atheists like Spinoza on.
Like Spinoza,
culture,
and Spinoza, he really seeded the European Enlightenment.
Yes.
There was something about being such an outsider with values that came from Judaism, but rethinking the outside community and the inside community.
Right.
The ultimate disruptor.
Right.
And this really, moved the culture. It took 100 years for the Enlightenment to happen, but it was all a response to Spinoza. And to me, and it's not just Spinoza, it's Marx, it's many, it's Jesus, if you want to, talk about it too. I mean, also
I don't think he
Jew.
was an atheist.
That's an interesting.
Okay, right. Okay,
You went, yeah.
right, all right.
I was like with you until okay,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Okay,
but
But you
leave
could
out
go
Jesus.
Freud.
Leave
Yeah,
out
you
could do
Jesus.
Freud.
Yeah.
You could
right,
do Freud.
Freud.
For sure. Heine,
Absolutely.
Yes,
you know,
right.
Trotsky.
You've got a lot.
We
Yeah.
got a lot. We got a lot
Jewish
of
Atheist
troublemakers.
Club. It's a big club,
Troublemakers.
yeah.
Rosa Luxemburg. Now, in the piece, I distinguish between this category that somebody else had made of non-Jewish Jews.
Sure.
And that is those who resolve the tension, the paradox, by renouncing their Jewish identity. If you
Sure.
ask Marx if he is a Jew, if you ask Trotsky, if you ask Rosa Luxemburg, they absolutely denounced it. But not Spinoza, not Freud,
And not you.
not Einstein,
And not you.
and not little me, right? Yes.
So I want to push here for a second. I'm sorry, because I really want to. So to David's point about Jewish continuity, which you acceded to so quickly, I just wanted to ask you, because
Yeah.
you wrote in the piece in SAPIR, which is an incredible piece, and it's interesting that you chose, of course, the Passover sing-song of the Manishtana, the four questions, the Arba Kushiot, as a way to frame it, because of course, everything about that moment of the four questions as formulated by the rabbis in the 2nd century and becoming this Greek symposia, seder, is very much about the civilization of Judaism and its pedagogy and its future, its culture, its everything. It's got the music, and you use that, and the message and the medium are all happening in your piece. Essentially, you're using your piece to talk about Jewish civilization as bigger than Jewish religion,
Yeah.
as it were. And two things struck me in your piece. One was that you didn't quote Kaplan, who said that Judaism is not a religion but a civilization. And I just kept thinking that it was so Kaplanian what you were saying.
Yes.
And the second thing is, and it's also interesting that David quoted Kaplan as even in his civilizational emphasis still doubled down on a God. It's debatable whether or not the God of Kaplan is a God that's anything like what we imagine the God of Israel. But I wanted to ask you the question about that, why you didn't invoke that. And two, you say that in the piece, Jewishness does not rest on metaphysical beliefs. So it begs the question about ethics, culture, and traditions that, again, it comes back to civilization. But are you essentially saying if there is no future without a belief in God, that you're essentially saying it's better to be honest about your belief in God than it is to worry about the continuity of the Jewish people? I just wondering about that.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Look, I don't know. I'm not a prophet. I don't know what's, I'm glad that people, I'm glad that there are people keeping the faith. But if it would get lost, something very precious would get lost. This is, I'm a naturalist all the way down. I believe only in the laws of nature. For me, I'm a consistent Spinozist. It's nature all the way down. And that to me is very beautiful. That's a kind of transcendence for me. I started in physics. I love the laws of nature, and I love good explanations. But I'm an atheist. But it is that the tension that's held between in Jews, in living in the culture, loving the outer culture, but also loving something else, that tension between moral universalism and this particular Jewish identity, I think is a very creative tension, and it gives you the ultimate outsider point of view, which is, I think, that's why it had the results that it did. Tension is creative.
And the first question about Kaplan and civilization.
Yes, I should have. I guess I was just sort of thinking. Yes, yes, I agree with Kaplan.
I want to bring David in to respond, but I also want to ask you, David, before you respond, and feel free to double back here. But then, you write so eloquently always. All of your books, I have them. I love reading the way that you think about God and religion and Judaism. In the piece, you wrote eloquently about doubting. I mean, the piece is named right for that. And you write that faith is not the opposite of doubt, but its companion. So as you're listening to the atheists and the Spinozas and the importance of being a skeptic, I wonder if you could weave that part of the piece in, as well as responding to imagery?
So that's why I find it impossible to just dismiss. I mean, I can't just say, oh, Rebecca, you're just so wrong, because it's not like I haven't ever had those thoughts. I have, and I do. And I would say a couple of things. First of all, that you wouldn't have this conversation in different traditions. You wouldn't say, for example, can you be an atheist Christian? Because Christianity is a faith tradition first and foremost, and even though there are people who call themselves cultural Christians, it's not the same thing. It's not unusual to have somebody, even somebody who comes to synagogue, who says that they don't, I mean, that's the old joke about the two Jews who are going to synagogue, you know, Schwartz and Goldstein, and they say, Goldstein, I know why you're going to synagogue, you believe in God, but Schwartz, you don't believe in God, why do you go? And he says, well, Goldstein goes to talk to God, and I go to talk to Schwartz, or I go to talk to Goldstein, whatever, one or the other. But also, so there is always a recognition that there is a culture that stands apart from theology in some sense. And my question is not if you can be I think we would all give basically the same question. Can you be a Jew without believing in God? Obviously you can. I mean, Exhibit A, right?
Right.
You can be. The question is, can you have a Jewish tradition that transmits itself without believing in God? And that's a much more difficult question, I think. So I told a friend of mine that I came here with, who happens to know also, who knew him as well, that when I was in Los Angeles, I did, when Carl Reiner was still alive, I did his 90th birthday party. I gave a blessing at his 90th birthday party. And as I was giving the blessing, somebody yelled out from the audience, why do you have a rabbi here? Reiner's an atheist. And he, at 90, bounded up on the stage, like literally climbed up on the stage and put his arm around me and said, I'm not an atheist, I'm a Jewish atheist, and that's different. And I think that that's true, that it is different. But the reason that it's different is because the accretions around belief in God have grown so great. I just don't know if they can stay. And so, in some ways, I'm not sure that the way the question is phrased is something that anyone could argue. I think we would all agree you can be a Jew without believing in God. Definitionally, if you're born of a Jewish mother, classically you're Jewish, whether you believe in God or not. I think, can there be a sustaining Jewish culture without a belief in God is the question really to be addressed. And that I'm much less sure of, and I think is sadly doubtful. And I say sadly because I think a lot of Jews, belief in God tends to be diminished with higher education, and that's unsurprising because universities are very secular places. And so I don't know how we square that circle.
But I have a question just to push back for a moment here on just to create some daylight between belief in God and Jewish practice, ritual, continuity, transmission. Isn't there a bridge here between belief in God and the God of Israel? In other words, if one were to begin, your average person and I walk on the street and say, do you believe in God? Again, in the United States, probably you'll have, your average person will say they believe in some version of a higher power, whatever it might be. But isn't it a big leap from there to the God of Israel who gave the Torah on Sinai, and the divine authority of the text, and Jewish history, and the God who took us out of Egypt? I remember as a kid, maybe as a kid or maybe in my 20s, that there was some rabbi from some temple in California that got into trouble for saying something that was quoted in the Jewish Week, which outrageous idea that if it turned out that the God never split the Red Sea, it wouldn't matter to that rabbi because the Torah is not a book of history. It's about, its moral lessons. So why does someone have to believe in God in any more reason than they believe in, let's say, the myth of the splitting of the Red Sea? It kind of has putative, heuristic value. You believe in God, and then you'll make the leap and say that there's a God in the Bible, but there is no connection really other than it's the way that Jews talk about the sacred. I mean, I was just wondering if you could,
So, okay. This
could help me.
So first of all, I'll start with the story. So it's 100 years from now or 200 years from now, pick your time frame. And scientists have figured everything out. Now we know with the help of AI. When I first told this joke, there wasn't AI. And so they look up at God and they say, God, you were great in your day, but we don't need you now. We can do everything you could do. And God says, really? Everything? They say, yes. God says, you can create a human being out of dust? They go, yes. He says, okay, let me see. So the scientist reaches down and scoops up some dirt, and God says, you get your own dust. And that idea, which is that the creation has an origin that is supernatural, that is designed, that the world is balanced on a knife edge that we can't explain or account for, that is a conception of God that doesn't get you to the God of Israel, but what it gets you to, and would be my answer, is that you can live a life in which you speak a language that relates to that supernatural entity. And if you think of religions as languages by which we speak to transcendence, then it doesn't have to be that God said, don't eat a cheeseburger. It can be that you're participating in this culture is the way that you communicate with other Jews, both around the world and through history, and also with transcendence, and that's the case that I would make.
That word transcendence is a very tricky word. Sometimes people mean something psychological by it, a transcendent experience. And of course, when you feel that time has stopped, and you feel almost as if you're in touch with eternity, and you feel like you merge with something larger than yourself. And this is a kind of psychological experience. There's also transcendence in the ontological sense, transcendence to tell us something about reality, and that is what you were
right.
I'm going
for the ontological.
You were going for the ontological, and that really is the difference between a completely naturalist point of view and a religious point of view. That there are two major reasons that a supernatural, a transcendent, a non-spatio-temporal entity is gestured toward it, and sometimes fill in the details too much. But I think you're saying we want to just gesture towards that, and that is why does the world exist? Why is there something rather than nothing? And also as a grounding for the moral law, for moral objectivity. Now, those are the two major reasons, and you pointed to why is there something rather than nothing. It is the hope. It is the Spinozist, Einsteinian hope that, and you can read a beautiful description of it at the end of Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, in which he...
Did anyone ever actually get to the end of that?
I did. I did. I know many people.
Jim Holt's book also is Why Is There Something Rather Than Nothing?
I'm not as fond of that, but because he really does not deal with the Spinozist answer. It is the view that inspires many scientists that there is an ultimate theory of everything, and by everything one means everything. That this would be a theory not just that would explain all phenomena, that we would get down to the laws. We're always getting down to deeper and deeper, more inclusive, more elegant laws. By more elegant, meaning a wider spread of phenomena are explained by very elegant laws. And these laws, not only do they explain phenomena, but they also explain other laws. And so there's this constant subsumption of laws into deeper laws. And the hope is, the hope I think that drives physicists, is that eventually we'll get down to the laws that explain why they have to be the laws and why there had to be a universe for these laws to describe. That it's just, it's explanation all the way down. And so, yes, we're not there yet. I mean, we've gotten very far. Physics is very beautiful.
But you'll take it on faith that you'll get there.
That's my faith. Yes, that's my faith. Exactly.
So for a moment, I just want to, for a brief moment, just ask you and turn the question that I asked David. So David spoke beautifully about that doubt is a companion to his faith.
Yes.
What role does doubt and faith work for the non-theist or the atheist? What is it? The scientific method? Is it that the continued commitment to empirical, evidence-based?
Well, we keep going deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And right now we have two very deep theories, but they're not reconcilable with each other. And we know that there's a deeper theory, that's going to explain both quantum mechanics and
But do you ever have moments when you think maybe there is a God? Just as I have moments when I think maybe there isn't?
Well, yes. It would be a big disappointment to me. It would really. It would be, what a treat.
God, I'm so upset that you exist.
Right.
You have no idea.
It would
After
diminish.
all of this, there you
After
are.
all this work, and it's just, at the bottom, it's just brute contingency. You just said, let it be this way and not, it didn't have to be this way. Don't you see how different that is? Yes.
I'm sure you know this well.
Great.
The end of this, but when I was a teenager, I was a pretty ardent atheist, and the person who made me an atheist was Bertrand Russell, who is still, to my mind, the wittiest of all the debunkers. And when someone asked him if after you died and you found yourself before God, what would you say? And he said, I would say, why did you not provide me with sufficient evidence? And so I think but that's part of the point, is that if there is a God, actually, there is some merit in making that leap without the evidence. So I don't know why you'd be so disappointed. Maybe it would be.
Well, just because I wanted to be the theory of everything, to explain everything. I mean, that it's not brute contingency. There's a reason for everything.
But there would be a reason if God set all the laws into motion, no?
Yeah, but this set of laws rather than another set of laws? No.
That's just, but that argument is just an infinite.
Right.
That's an infinite.
We want to end
right,
that,
but
and that's what the final theory of everything is supposed to do.
I'm aware. Yeah.
Yes.
But we're back into the soup of God conversation.
And then the other thing, of course, is the morality thing, which we could also get into, right?
Sure.
Which I think is interesting as well.
It is interesting as well.
Yeah.
My assumption is that you have asserted that metaphysics need not be the substrate for ethics and morality. Sam Harris has written a book called The Moral Landscape, and others have written and tried to argue that science itself can provide us with an ethical and morality, evidence-based morality and ethics based on principles that also can be found mostly in Buddhist literature and other Eastern religious traditions about suffering and pleasure and pain and so on. Is that a fair assumption to say that traditional Jewish values, morality, and so on need not be dependent in your worldview on the belief in God? You can find other reasons to say that murder is wrong.
I think that there is a branch of philosophy called moral philosophy.
Moral philosophy.
And we've been working it out for a long time.
For a long time.
And in fact, making a lot of progress, so that we go back and we read the Bible and we say, parts of it are very immoral. Slavery? Really?
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So, in fact, yeah. And you, of course, are aware of the Euthyphro argument.
Of course.
From, shall I say it?
Sure.
Yeah?
Sure.
So it goes back to Plato, and he was talking about the gods rather than God, but it's easily translated into monotheism. And it's from a dialogue called the Euthyphro. And Socrates meets a very smug prophet who knows exactly what's right and wrong on the basis of the gods. And Socrates asks him, he says, well, I'm going to translate it into monotheistic terms. He says, does God command certain things, so to, let's say, take care of the most vulnerable in our society, the orphans and the widows? Does God command this because it's good, or is it good because God commands it? And then he tries to show that neither of them yield morality. If God commands, be compassionate, don't commit genocide, all these things, because they're the right things, then that's the reason that they're moral, and God is just sort of rubber stamping it. But he's not really doing anything here. And if it's not, if it's just fiat, it's just whim, not grounded by anything, well then that's a kind of moral relativism, isn't it? He could have chosen something else. And this is an ancient argument.
It is. I have a third answer.
Ancient, yes?
My answer would be that God created a world in which those things are moral. So it's not actually that God arbitrarily makes them moral or that they're moral without God, but that's the kind of world that God created.
A kind of world in which we can be
In
both
which
moral and immoral.
morality is like being kind and in which immorality is being cruel.
Yeah.
So it sort of has God in it, but is also not entirely dependent on God's will. It's just the way God set up the system. So doesn't that work?
Right. The only problem with that are the multiple times that you and I both know in where God seems to make a first pass at something that we clearly, at this point in history, thinks are a priori.
Well, it's clear at least in the Bible that God is not right. God is not the God of the philosophers. God is the God of the Bible.
The God of the philosophers is the God with which we've made very slow progress, it's not.
Well, let me ask. In this heavily anthropomorphic conversation where we borrow human language and human frames, which is almost inevitably the case that we do that. Let me ask the both of you: to what extent does this ring true to you? Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of Palestine, famously wrote that all definition of God leads to heresy. All definition of God leads to heresy. That all of the labels that we use, all the ideas that we use are pointing towards the thing, but it isn't the thing itself.
Right.
So to what extent is the conversation between the two of you about this thing called this being that we call God, Yah, whatever the name is, we call the pet name that we use for God. To what extent is it a conversation, as my friend and colleague and this amazing thinker, Adina Phillips, also wrote in the same journal, an article about the binary question about theism versus atheism. Is it a semantic conversation when an avowed atheist like Sam Harris speaks in his book on spirituality, or has an app for spirituality and starts to speak about things that if you're listening, you think he's drawing on the mystics, the non-dual mystics. He's speaking about the pantheists, the panentheists. He's speaking about consciousness, to use these terms from Eastern religions and Western mystical traditions. Is there a place where the two of you might meet in your understandings of the nameless suchness or consciousness or whatever it might be? Is there any universe of dialogue between the atheist and the theist that converges on a God that isn't like the God of the Bible?
I mean, yes, you could.
That was a very Jewish gesture.
Yes,
that's all I could say. Right.
I think there really is a difference between saying, do we need something that exists outside of the spatiotemporal realm? Does reality contain something outside of it? Or is the cosmos all that there is? Is the natural cosmos all that there is? I think there really is a difference. But where I feel we could really agree, maybe this is also there's something about the spiritual aspirations or the religious aspirations that I that I share. Right? And it's, you know, and I respect spirituality, I respect religiosity. It's not the way I experience the world, but I respect it. And why I so respect it is it's a recognition. Existence is wondrous. I mean, it's wondrous. Existence is a wondrous thing. It's amazing. And you think about your little life, and you want to be able to live in some way that will do justice to existence, to the grandeur, the magnificence of it, the sense of gratitude for it, the beauty of it. And I think that I consider that a religious experience, a religious aspiration, something. And it's something I think that is shared by atheists, especially Jewish atheists, maybe, but atheists, it certainly is true of Spinoza. It was certainly true. In fact, Einstein called it, you know, the cosmic religious feeling, which was, it was only the natural world, no supernatural entity, but you want to live in a way to...
Enchanted.
You want to do justice to existence.
Yeah,
and so in that sense, I feel...
Here's my test for you. Whether you're on which side of the debate you find yourself on. If you think of the world as a puzzle, then you're a naturalist. That is, we may not know all the answers, but the answers are knowable. I think that that's how Rebecca sees it. I see it as a mystery. That is, it is ultimately unknowable, no matter how smart we get. And it's a mystery because it's something beyond rationality and cognition. And so when you ask me about God, what I tell students all the time is like, if you ask a 2-year-old what a 20-year-old is like, they will have no idea, and they won't even know what it is they don't know. So if you ask me what God is like or what God wants, I both don't know, and I don't know what I don't know, because it's the difference between God and me is greater than between a 20-year-old and a 2-year-old. But I believe that there is an ultimate mystery to which I can align myself in my life.
So what would you say, just to follow up with that, I want to turn to you, Rebecca, with a similar question, the opposite direction. What would you say to a Jew who wants to feel connected to their heritage, to Judaism, but feels distant from belief in God? They can't get there.
What I would say is, because I have an a priori commitment to the Jewish tradition, I would say, if you study and learn and practice Judaism, your life will be better even if there is no God. That actually, if there is no God, so the question is, how can you best live a life? And to be connected to community and to take your life seriously and your soul seriously and wisdom seriously, and to study the oldest tradition that is continuous about how to grow your soul is certainly as good a way to live a life as any. So, I mean, maybe I'm arguing against my own position, but I would say, because I'm saying there's a way to be Jewish without God, but I would say that it's still a very well-lived life to be part of the community, and that it's incredibly rewarding, and also that at moments of loss or joy, in other words, the most intensely human moments, those are the moments when the Jewish tradition actually has the most to say to you. So
I want to come back to that when I read one of the questions from the people who are sitting here, because I want to dig down on something, but thank you for that. Rebecca, I would just turn it to you. What would you say to someone who feels that believing God is such a central core component of Judaism, but they're worried that they're losing something essential by embracing it or by not embracing it?
You know, I believe in the great diversity of our species, and it works for some.
Yeah.
And as I say, it doesn't work for others, and it didn't grow I have to say, it did not grow my soul. Maybe it would have been different. I was born into an Orthodox family, and I was a woman, a girl. That might have been, it might have been different. I don't know. I don't know what it would be like to live an alternate life. But it doesn't work, you know, for everyone. And so some people are not community people. But, you know, I mean, yes, look, I love the culture. I love the civilization. I do. And what you say about, you know, in times of trouble, this is very, very true. I think that the culture, the civilization, I think it is so attractive, with or without God. I think there's something very, very special about it, and you know, and so I have some faith that it will continue, but I'm very glad that there are rabbis around.
Well, I just want to, one of the things that you reminded me of is that I often have said, in the course of my career, that there is a real thing called post-traumatic God disorder. That you can have such trauma around that word, and trauma around the God that you don't believe in, but that you were forced to believe in, that your own theological curiosity, your own theological courage, your idiosyncratic way of relating to the divine is limited to some extent by very strict understandings of what God might mean or might not mean. And it just kind of points to this question that I want to ask you, David. Someone asked this, and I want to phrase it before I tell you the question. Like when you were saying that believing in God and leading a Jewish life to that student is, you know, a net positive, the assumption I'm assuming that you're making is that it's as long as it's not the Orthodox God, meaning, and I'm going to say this very explicitly, as long as it's not the fundamentalist God. In other words, having another person come into the world that believes that God tells us to go and kill, you know, other human beings in that God's name is probably not a net positive in the world, maybe.
Do you assume that that's what the fundamentalist God is? I'm not sure that if you had, for example, a Haredi Jew here, he would say, my God tells me to go and kill other human beings.
Right. I don't want to speak for Haredi Jews. I was a Haredi Jew myself. I would just say that the assumption is that the belief in God also comes with it the belief in an evolving tradition, that the rabbinic assumption of evolution.
Yes.
And it comes to this question, which is why are you not strictly Orthodox?
Oh, that. Oh, okay. Oh, that one's easy.
Or what do you think Orthodox Jews are missing? Both questions on the same card.
What do I think they're missing? First of all, my brother, who is also a rabbi, is sitting in the front row. We were not raised Orthodox, so I don't think either of us have ever been Orthodox. So I think that it would be hard for me to talk about why I'm not what I have never been, right? It's like when someone says, why are you not Christian? Lahavdil, it's not the same thing, but I can't speak honestly about that because the truth is I've never inhabited that identity. So for me to say, oh, there are all these things that are wrong with it, is kind of dishonest because I've never been that. But I can tell you at least intellectually why I don't believe that the Torah is literally the Word of God. And that seems to me to be sort of a high bar to entry to be Orthodox. And also, I've never lived and don't feel compelled to live a meticulously halachic life according to most Orthodox strictures. And those two things are clearly combined because I think that if you want to know the great dilemma, and I know you do, but if you want to know the great dilemma of non-literalist Judaism, which is how I refer to it, because fundamentalism has actually different terms that it's a different idea that doesn't really apply to Judaism, but it's literalist. Here's the issue. For most of Jewish history, the reason people did things was because God told them to. That was the ideology. God told you to do this, so you did it. In the modern age, because most non-literalist Jews don't really believe that God said don't eat a cheeseburger, what you have to do is say, these are the reasons that it is good for you to not eat a cheeseburger. And whether it is community or your soul or the tradition, the point is giving somebody a positive reason to do something is much less compelling, given human nature, than the creator of the universe told you not to. And I find myself in the less compelling camp, which is a problem for getting Jews to do things. And I can't, and similarly to Rebecca, who says, I can't help it, I just don't believe in God. I can't help it, I don't believe in that conception of God, which both makes my life easier and more difficult.
So to you, Rebecca, thank you. That was comprehensive. That was great. Rebecca, so question here from the audience about atheism is, how do you, as an atheist, participate in Jewish ritual, recite prayers? Do you feel like a hypocrite?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't recite prayers.
Or you don't recite prayers?
No.
There you go.
No.
That's it, right there.
No,
Easy?
no.
Okay.
But
just wanna
if
say
you
that-
did recite,
Right.
no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You cross your fingers as you
Right,
did
right,
it. You just like, you
Right.
What were you going to say?
No, of course I don't. I just wanted to say, I'm not an atheist because of doubts about God. I really want to make that clear. I was moved by your piece about how your existential reverence, your seriousness of life is increased by your thinking of this transcendent presence as permeating the universe. And mine is not. It's not that I doubt. I don't, it's not skeptical doubts.
Would you say that it's conviction or that it just doesn't even enter your mind?
What? That
Belief in God. Is it that you've thought about it and you think that's clearly not true, or you think you can't even entertain the possibility?
At this point, I can't even, I really can't. For me, the moral argument had been a huge hurdle when I was a kid. And then, as it happened, I read Bertrand Russell's Why I'm Not a Christian. My parents, they were quite liberal about what I was allowed to read. And of course, when I brought home this book from the library, Why I'm Not a Christian, so yeah, we don't want you to be a Christian. We want you to be a nice Jewish girl.
Wow.
Little did they know.
Little did they know. Wow.
So, and he goes through the standard arguments for God's existence and shows what's wrong with them. By the way, one of my books was called 36 Arguments for the Existence.
I read it, and I read every argument. Yep.
Yeah, 36
It's very well
arguments.
done, so I don't recommend it to you.
Yeah.
No, but can't you, the whole thing was, it's not about what's wrong with these arguments. There are 36 arguments for God's existence and an analysis of why they're all flawed. So, I went a little, had to compete with Bertrand Russell.
But it was,
but when
I just have to say, Rebecca, for someone for whom it doesn't really, arrive on your radar, you went out of your way to make sure that it doesn't arrive on your radar, right? Like you've written books about it, and you've struggled with it. It no longer appears on your radar.
Yes.
Yeah, the lady doth protest a lot.
No. It's actually what that book was about. The appendix was intention with the novel itself, because the novel was about the beauty of this culture, of the Jewish culture, and so it's so the two are really supposed to be in tension with each other. I don't think that religion, and here we again agree.
I know.
We totally agree. It's not about arguments for or against, or doubts about these arguments. That's not.
So I do want to just say, because you said that about your parents and why I'm not a Christian, one of the most beautiful things, we had a truly wonderful father. My father, who was a rabbi, he was just a wonderful man. And when I started to read Bertrand Russell in high school, one day he came home and he had bought me a couple of Bertrand Russell books. And I thought, I was very smart because he was saying, I'm not afraid of this.
Wow.
And so it was the opposite in some ways of...
so beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I just wanted to underscore, and I want to come back to both of the things you said, where we had someone who wrote in a really beautiful note. I find it beautiful. I don't know if you will, but who said that there were millions of Jews in the USSR who lived without religion, however, they remained Jewish. So one can be an atheist and remain a Jew and raise your children as Jews. Just be a mensch, believe or don't believe, God will take care of the rest. Ironic. And then he said, yes, or she said, yes, there can be a sustaining Jewish culture without believing in God. So that was something I wanted to put into the space.
That is beautiful.
There's three more. I just wanted to make sure, and then I wanted to come back to something both of you just touched on before we close. David, someone wanted to know, what would make you change your mind about God's existence? I'm going to guess that there's almost nothing but that.
Yeah, I'm not sure that anything in this life would. I mean, if I die and nothing happens, I'll say, oh, I was wrong. But that was, Cicero said that thousands of years ago, which is, if I'm wrong, you'll never be able to laugh at me, but if I'm right, I'll be able to laugh at you. That was how Cicero put it. I would not laugh at you. I would just say, you see? But I don't know that, the reason that I say I don't know is because it's not like I haven't had doubts anyway, and it's not like I think I will run across a new argument. So I think that one of the things that I quote in the essay is that I feel like Rabbi Nachman, again, lahavdil, I'm not Rabbi Nachman, but who said I'm a moon man. My faith waxes and wanes. So I think there will be moments when I'll feel it more and moments when I'll feel it less. But at least for me, I'm better, and I think it is the best part of me when I feel faithful, not when I feel faithless. I think it is the more cynical and snarky part of me that is dismissive of me, not of you, but of me.
Well, but let's go to Rebecca. Rebecca, is there anything that could make you believe in God? Of course.
Of course. When
God comes down and says, hey.
No, I mean, if
because you're a scientist, you can't know everything.
Of course, I look up at Orion, and then suddenly it's switched positions, and it's a mug and dove. Yes, of course.
Let's keep our eyes out for that, okay? This is a bit of a heady one, but I'm hoping that we'll do this one quickly. You spoke with Alex O'Connor?
Yes.
Rabbi,
There's a podcast. Yeah.
Yeah, and he dubs himself an agnostic, as do many. What is the difference between his agnosticism and, let's say, Maimonides, or in this case, Aquinas, or any of the others who are apophatic about their belief and kind of the via negativa? I'm assuming that's what you're referring to, that the God,
so very
not
quickly,
God. Yeah,
he says he doesn't know whether there's a God or not, though he's doubtful. They say they can't define what God is, but they believe in a God. That's basically
that. I'm going to save the most juicy one for the end. And here's just another statement, it seems. We are finding out that trees talk to each other, but a frequency that we are just beginning to hear with technology. How do we know that it is just a matter of frequency? Agnostic, perhaps, should replace atheism until we develop better frequency recognition. That's a question. Maybe instead of being atheist, I'm assuming that atheism posits that you know that God doesn't exist, which of course is philosophically untenable. Yeah. You're more accurately described as an agnostic. Is that okay with you, or?
Yeah, as I said,
in theory, there could be some way to listen in on the frequency of God. In theory, that as a philosopher you must agree with.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Good. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, why not throw this in at the end? Someone asked it, and it made its way to me, and I think, okay, let's do it. How does Zionism intersect with faith? Is the future of Israel different for believers and non-believers? And does anti-Zionism go against Jewish values?
Really?
Oh, wow. Well, this is at the end?
Yeah, I was going to say, right, exactly. Why don't you just ask us who to vote for? You want to?
Can I just
sure.
Frame slightly
Yes.
the way that I would begin? I think the assumption of this question is if you believe in the God of the Bible, do you root historical claims of the land to Jewish civilizational or cultural, or some religious kind of presumption. And must one believe in the God of the Bible or the God of history in order to, I think that's where, I don't know.
Do you want to take that, or you want me to?
We can both take it.
Okay. You want me to go first?
Yes.
Okay. I would say this, that Jews have a historical connection to the land of Israel is indisputable to anybody who is open to facts. There are Hebrew coins that are unearthed from thousands of years ago. I wrote a book about King David. There's archaeological evidence that there was a King David. That is 1,000 years before the Common Era, that is before Jesus, and about 1,700 years before Muhammad. So God or no God, Jews have a long sustaining connection to the land of Israel. And yes, I think it is constituent of being Jewish to believe in that connection in a different way, in a peoplehood way, but it's just good history to say Jews, there has never been, in all of the continuity of the land of Israel, there has never been a period when there wasn't some population of Jews there. And also, just to get a little polemical, all I can tell you is, in all the years I have been alive, despite what any nation did, Germany can get us into 2 world wars, China can treat the Uyghurs badly, Myanmar can treat the Rohingya badly, the Syrians can kill 500,000 of their own people. The only nation that I have ever heard shouldn't exist happens to be the same nation that is inhabited by a people that has experienced hatred for thousands of years. That is, to me, beyond a coincidence. So I would say, even divested completely of any belief in a God or supernatural, should Israel exist, whether you're Jewish or not, absolutely.
Beautiful. Yeah. There's nothing I disagree with there. I mean, of course, you do experience, part of the question was, if you're a religious Jew, do you experience Israel differently? Yeah. And of course you do. I mean, to think that this was a piece of land, a piece of earth, a piece of our globe that was given to this people. But, I also, to me, just the story of, the Romans conquered half of the world, right? They destroyed so many countries. They decimated. Anyway, one people kept all through the millennia, the thought of this place and the dream of going back to it, and that is only one people, and then after the horrors of the 20th century, it happened, just showing for sociological and how important it was for them to have their own country. But that in itself, that is such a, the story of the Jews is,
it's an amazing
as
story.
A Jewish atheist, it's an extraordinary story, and the connection with the land is part of that story. So yes, I agree with you too much.
So I wanted to finish and thank everyone for being here and for those who are online. I just wanted to finish by noting that for me as somebody who struggled as well with my own belief in God, my own relationship with God, and who fundamentally roots my own Jewish belief in God in mystical, lived, intimate experience. But for me to be here at the 92nd Street Y as somebody who is now in a space where Baruch Spinoza's name is proudly on the large concert hall, the Kaufman Concert Hall, it's a remarkable moment to be on stage with you, Rebecca, and with you, David, because I am so thankful that I live at a time where there's no cherem for people like you. And there's, God forbid, and that not only, even more so, that possibility is not a possibility, that we live at a time where rich debate and getting to know people on a personal level supersedes what they believe in a supernatural being that might or might not exist. That, if there's ever a testimony to the deep Jewish belief in conversation and in seeing in the other like the face of the divine. It's not believing in God, but believing in one another, and a deep humanism that is present on the stage tonight. And I want to thank SAPIR for putting together such a rich, journal on faith, for variegated, multivocal conversation. And I'm really thankful, specifically for the two of you and what you both wrote, and that you engaged in such a really rich conversation here tonight. I want to thank everybody who was involved in making this possible, to Susan Engel and the Talks department, and the entire Y staff and everybody here for a really amazing evening. Thank you all for being here.
And thank you, David.